You're listening to English with Monty, the podcast about the English language. Today is 8-Minute English, talking about question tags and indirect questions. Hello there and welcome to 8-Minute English with Monty. We're going to talk about a couple of subjects today. We're going to talk about question tags and indirect questions. Question tags, what are they exactly? Question tags are often used to check something that you already think is true. For example, your name's Jane, isn't it? To form a question tag, you need to use the correct auxiliary verb. For example, do, does for the present, will or won't for the future. And then also obviously a pronoun, for example, he, she, it, they. A negative tag if the sentence is positive, and a positive tag if the sentence is negative. For example, a positive sentence could be, it's cold today, isn't it? A negative sentence, she isn't here today, is she? You're French, aren't you? You aren't happy, are you? They live in Ankara, don't they? They don't smoke, do they? The match finishes at 8, doesn't it? She doesn't eat meat, does she? As you see with those particular examples, you're just using the main verb. If you're using the main verb, for example here you've got live, finish, smoke or eat. Yeah, so there are two options. So you can use don't or doesn't depending on whether it's third person, or do or does, obviously as the positive question tag. Then of course you can move on to something in the negative. They worked in a bank, didn't they? We've met before, haven't we? You didn't like the film, did you? She hasn't been to Paris before, has she? Obviously in that case, still using the auxiliary do, but obviously in the past it didn't. You're using the main verb. And then, for example, she worked in a bank, didn't she? Here you're using the auxiliary in the past. And then in the opposite, you didn't like the film, did you? So obviously you still have to use the negative form. So didn't in the past, like. And then you're using the past form again, but obviously in the positive, so did you? The other two examples, we use the present perfect. Again, you're using the auxiliary. So we've met before, haven't we? So the auxiliary, obviously, of the present perfect is have, so that's the reason why we use haven't we. She hasn't been to Rome, has she? Again, this is the positive version. Again, we're using the present perfect third person, so therefore it's hasn't, and then the positive would be has she? You can also use it, of course, with the future, as we mentioned before. You'll be okay, won't you? You won't tell anyone, will you? Again, obviously you're using the auxiliary with will here. And so what's the main reason for us using question tags? Really in English, as we said, it's to check something you think is true. It's also potentially for confirmation, and we also change the way we say the question tag depending on what we think. For example, if I'm not sure about something, I say, for example, you're French, aren't you? Obviously in that case, the tone seems to go up at the end, so that means I'm not quite sure about it. If I said, you're French, aren't you? That's more certainty. I'm pretty sure that must be true. In English, we do actually use it a lot. I appreciate in other languages that may not be something you use, but check out next time when a native speaker is speaking, because it's always used for confirmation. It's always used to check if things are true. We wouldn't say something like, you are French, it's true. I appreciate that might be a direct translation, but yes, in English we wouldn't say anything like that. We would always use the question tag. Positive at the beginning, negative at the end. Or if the opposite is true in terms of your confirmation, then negative at the beginning and positive at the end. So just make sure you remember that, as long with the auxiliaries that form the question tag itself. It's important to note as well that question tags are more commonly used in spoken English rather than written English. I'll give you a few examples now and you need to fill in the last part. So you haven't seen this film? Okay, what was that one? You haven't seen this film, have you? Your sister lives in Spain? So that one is, your sister lives in Spain, doesn't she? He can't drive. So that one is, he can't drive, can he? She's a doctor. She's a doctor, isn't she? Moving on now to indirect questions. Indirect questions are basically used to be a polite form. For example, if you're trying to find some directions from somebody in the street, then they can be very useful. A direct question, for example, could be, where's the post office? An indirect question would be, could you tell me where the post office is? Maybe if you're asking a friend, you would say, where's the post office? If you're asking somebody you don't know and you want to be polite, then you would say, could you tell me where the bank is? Notice at the end, the verb goes at the very end because it's a statement after where. Obviously, the form at the beginning of the sentence is, could you tell, in terms of a question form. And then after where, you say where the bank is. So where the bank is, here it's not a question. The question is at the beginning of the sentence, so that's why you put the verb at the very end. What time do the shops close? Do you know what time the shops close? So again, with what time between the two different clauses, then you use the verb at the very end. Is there a bus station near here? Do you know if there's a bus station near here? Does this train go to London Bridge? Could you tell me if this train goes to London Bridge? If the question begins with an auxiliary verb, add if or whether after could you tell me or do you know. In the example we gave, we've got, do you know if there's a bus station near here? You could also say, do you know whether there is a bus station near here? Or could you tell me if this train goes to Victoria? Could you tell me whether this train goes to Victoria? In this case, there's not really a difference. You can use whether or if interchangeably. We can also use the structure after can you remember. For example, can you remember where he lives? So that's about it for now. That's covering question tags and indirect questions. So now if you want to confirm something with somebody, then you can use a question tag and you'll know how to use it. And then we have indirect questions, of course. Now you can use them if you want to be more polite in certain situations. I think indirect questions are great, particularly if you don't know somebody. It's a good way to be a bit more polite and also to get a better response from people. Anytime you're polite and you don't know someone is always a good thing in British culture. Give it a try. Thanks for listening. You've been listening to 8 Minute English.